Hello, everyone. Series 3, Episode 1 then, Racing Together. And today we've got a wonderful panel of people. I'm today's presenter, and this one is going to be mainly focused on the transformational impact of sport on mental and physical health. And the group that we've got, probably including myself, really, I think have got lots of views, experiences that will be good to talk about, I think. So this webinar recording can be viewed online afterwards on the Racing Together website, YouTube, and podcast links will be emailed out afterwards after the Zoom. You can sign up to the newsletter as well to find out about future episodes. I think we've got one to put up at the end as well, which will be the next episode. So do stick with us for that. And then we would love questions. So anyone that's tuned in, if you've got any questions for any of the members, the panelists who I will introduce shortly, please do that. Don't wait till afterwards. We'd love to hear from you now. And when this is finished, a survey will pop up as well, again, for any feedback requests for future topics as well. So if there's anything we either don't cover, even if it's the same as today's topic, that you'd like us to go back to, or anything new, then please do let us know. Racing Together itself, if anyone that's on here doesn't know, represents all the sport, varied community engagement, education activity, and is a partnership led by the charity Racing to School, who I now work with, which is why I'm here. These webinars are really popular and they're designed to engage all of the voices, including the panelists and everybody that's hopefully on here watching. So welcome. Hopefully we'll all get something from it, including myself, and I'm sure the panelists. We are going to talk about, as I say, the transformational impact of sport on mental and physical health. And I think each panelist will probably speak from their own experience about different things. And the main focus, obviously, as we're all racing based in some way, shape or form, we want to identify racing's contribution to that and how unique it is. Also, as well, how we can promote the wider benefits of it. As again, don't forget to ask questions. There's Q&A chat function, so please do use that. Today's panel then, I'll introduce myself if any of you don't know who I am. Obviously, Leona Mayer. I used to race ride myself far too long ago now. I know I don't look old enough, probably 10 years ago now since I rode. I now do obviously TV for different channels, and I now with Racing to School as well. So hopefully I can bring something to that. Panelists then, more important than me, way more important than me. We'll start with Amy Hockley-Wrighton, who's from Racing Welfare. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks, Leona. It's lovely to be here.
Welfare manager, tell us about you and tell us about your contribution to racing, as it were, up till this point.
Yeah, well, I've been here at Racing Welfare now for 6 years. It's gone incredibly quickly. Very much hands-on role prior to this, working within the horse racing industry. And yeah, I've just found my thing here at Racing Welfare and love everything that the sport has to offer the industry, really.
You do a lot of sports yourself. Tell us about that.
I do. So the horses kind of fell away as the office hours increased, and then I found myself falling into triathlon and then Ironman. So I went to
falling
the extreme.
into, you can't fall into that.
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't be far off falling in. So I know it's a long day out there on the race course when I do that, but I enjoy it. Good for my mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. So massively, you know, doing lots of other sports as well that I'm sure mentally and physically difficult. We got Sam Herks as well, physical activity operations manager. That's a mouthful, isn't it? From Mind Charity. So welcome, Sam. Same for you. You know, tell us about your kind of input into racing, how you got there, etc.
Well, yeah, I'm actually coming from completely different. I don't have too much of a background in racing, but at Mind we've supported the horse racing industry, including BHA, around approaches to mental health with workforce, but also with staff. So I'm coming at it slightly different perspective today.
Perfect. We need those perspectives. That's the entire point, isn't it? Someone who couldn't be coming from any more of a racing background is Paige Fuller. Very pleased to have Paige here. Fabulous former jump jockey, not that long been retired, riding much more recently than I. You can introduce yourself if people don't know who you are. I'm sure they all do.
Well, I don't know about that. But yeah, I obviously rode over the jumps, as you said. As I I don't know if you've read the blurbs, everyone watching, but had a few sort of injury setbacks over the last couple of years, which sort of meant that it pushed my retirement forwards a little bit. Obviously in that transition period, so this topic is probably quite relevant to what I'm going through at the moment. But otherwise, yeah, just really looking forward to sharing experiences today.
Yeah, very, very true. A lot of this is probably going to be more relevant to you than the majority of people, to be fair. So great to have you here, and thank you for your time. And then the final person who helped me actually set up this, thankfully. So Adam Whitehead has made sure we can all see each other, who's an athlete mentor from the Dame Kelly Holmes Trust. Adam, tell us about yourself and what we'll be hearing from about you.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I guess my background was elite level sport, so I was a swimmer for a long time. Went to all the major competitions in the world, and I retired when I was 26. But and since then, gone on to be an athlete mentor, working with young people who are facing disadvantage through the Dame Kelly Holmes Trust, where I'm now the curriculum development manager. So write the content that we deliver to young people, but also support the athletes that are in that transition, the thing that Paige has just described. You know, in that transition after their sport, we've supported over 700 athletes to make that transition into new careers, meaningful, purposeful lives, and yeah, I've been involved in many of those. So really excited to be here talking about something that I love. I'm also a mental health first aid instructor, so deliver mental health first aid training for coaches, for teachers, for any people that sort of come into contact with either young people or adults.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, you know, you say about athletes. I feel like every other sport, people see the people, the people in that sport as athletes, whereas I think racing, it's only a really new thing, isn't it, that people even use the word athlete about jockeys, which, you know, I mean, I don't think I was ever called an athlete when I was riding. Maybe I wasn't one, but I just think it wasn't, you know, you kind of weren't seen as a sports person, which is a bit strange, but massively are now because of how things have changed. So welcome to you as well. Thanks, everybody. That's the intros then for the 4 panelists. I'll give bits of views on things if they're relevant to me as well, but mainly they'll be the guys we're going to hear from. So as I said about the transformational effect on physical and mental health, we kind of, if we focus on it in racing, I think mainly, so we'll start with Paige. I assume, Paige, you would have the most view on this as regards how much racing as a sport can have that massive effect physically and mentally. If you do tell us about those kind of recent injuries of yours and how you kind of got through it and who helped you get through it.
Yeah, so I suppose there's sort of 2 quite like interesting points in that question, because there's the sort of help of racing towards the sort of mental and physical health, like I'm sure Amy will be talking about as well. But from my experience, I mean, I got into racing initially just because riding was my hobby and I loved going fast, and so all of my spare time was just spent on horses. I started pony racing when I was 9, and it was always my outlet. So it was sort of quite interesting that then developing into a career, because obviously your hobby then becomes your actual career, which brings in itself a sort of completely different emotional roller coaster than you expect it to be. But equally it helped me manage that emotional roller coaster a lot better, because the highs were so much more high, because I never thought that I could do what I did, and I ended up doing that. So I was very lucky like that. But yeah, the emotional roller coasters of any sort of sports is just massive. And you know, injuries, when they come, they normally come when you're really busy, because naturally you've got a high percentage of having a fall, and therefore you're probably going to miss out on more rides. And then that sort of process of getting yourself through the rehab, picking yourself back up, and it's really funny. Like, I thought I built up quite a big resilience I thought my resilience levels had really risen through my participation within racing, because obviously again these sort of repetitive occurrences that keep going. But actually it's funny now that I realize I'm actually no more resilient than when I started.
Oh, I'm sure you
are.
I'm sure that's not true.
Yeah, but you learn lots of different coping mechanisms, don't you? And I think racing's a really positive environment like that as well, because it's tough, but there are so many people around us that support us, and we're very lucky like that. I think within racing, you know, for me, obviously we've got the PGA, you've got Jets, you know, again, you've got racing welfare if you need them, but they're probably more directed at stable staff themselves. But if you needed them, they're there. And the Injured Jockeys Fund, and we're so lucky as sports people to have that support system, which has massively helped.
Yeah, I think that's the crucial thing, isn't it? If you needed them, they are there. I know for a fact from my personal experience, you know, 10, 12 years ago, the majority of the kind of things you've just mentioned, you know, they weren't there, or they were nowhere near as prevalent, they weren't as advertised, you know, and there probably wasn't the support that there needed to be. And of course, there could always be more. And that's the whole point of these. You know, we're trying to work towards what do people need and pushing to give them that. But yeah, I think we're doing a much better job of it. That would take us on to Amy. So obviously from a, you know, again, the racing welfare point of view, whether it's stable staff, jockeys, whoever, yard people, you know, rider outers, whatever, you know, it has a physical and mental effect on everybody, you know, even if you are just in a yard, Amy, and I'm sure, you know, say only, I don't mean that in a lesser way, you know, you're not a jockey, you're not in the limelight, but those people need help too.
They do, and they would get just as much care and support. We have obviously our occupational health scheme that's there, ready to pick up the pieces. I think, Paige, when you touched on, you know, is your hobby has become your career, and I think that's true for a lot of people, whatever sort of level they're working at within this industry. And it's that impact of, so what is your hobby after your hobby is your career and your passion and all of those things?
Well, it's your entire life. That's the thing.
It's your
your
life.
job
It's
is
your
then your
life.
entire
Yeah,
life.
absolutely. And then when something comes along and you get an injury and you're not able to do those things that, you know, tick the boxes for you and keep you well, that's when we then start to see the problems. So we see that incredibly close link, physical, mental health.
Yeah, I actually have a quick story. I won't take up too much time with my own stuff, but I have a very close friend whose dad has been a yard man for a long time, and he's a good one. And he struggled for his entire life with alcoholism, and you know, he's kind of got to the point nearly where he was homeless and stuff like that. And Racing Welfare really did everything for him. They just put him in a new house, you know, and I don't know where he would be without Racing Welfare. I don't know if he'd even be here anymore. And my friend actually lost her mum through illness. So, you know, her dad is all she's got left. So I think she's probably, you know, she's a close friend of mine. And that would be a good example of me where Racing Welfare, I don't know what, you know, he'd have done without them. So that was a massive, massive thing for him. But we're talking about, you know, career ending. When your career ends.
It's okay to jump in there, because I think,
of course, please.
You know what Amy's just sort of described. You know, we come across all the time, whatever industry you're in. We happen to be talking about racing today, but you know, from my sport, from other sports, but also from people in different professions. You know, from a well-being, self-esteem point of view, I think sport and it appears to be what we've just said there, is that people become very attached to what they do, and it becomes their self-esteem, and they have this attached esteem to what they do. It's like a teacher going into a classroom and having a fantastic day. Yeah, I'm a great teacher, but also I feel great myself. Equally, if they have a poor day, they go home and actually beat themselves up because actually I'm attached to what I do. And I think it took me a long time when I retired to reframe that. And swimming back then was something that I did. It wasn't who I was. But at the time, it absolutely was. So I think, you know, how we can try and promote that through the trainers, through everybody who comes into contact with sports people, jockeys, that the athlete, the sports person, they're doing something, that they're competing in something. It's something that they do, and it's not who they are. And trying to encourage this sort of broader sense of the person. So when injuries happen, when retirement happens, whatever role you're in the yard or if you're riding, that actually you know you're far more equipped because you're more than just the thing that you're doing. And that's the bit that I think we really need to promote amongst everybody.
Yeah, and I guess, Sam, you could probably jump in here. Again, we're talking about that kind of, you know, mental health in sport, and it does come into when you know, obviously when you retire, when you have to stop, whether it be like Paige through injury, or, you know, other people it's through other things, etc. But, you know, in any kind of job, full stop, you know, that mental health thing comes into it. But, you know, if you kind of, I think it's so much harder from a physical point of view if you've got a sporty job, a sporty life, because if you wake up and you feel bad and you've got to sit in an office, I'm not, you know, making it any lesser, but when you're then feeling down and you haven't got that energy and you haven't got that push from your mind, and you've then got to go and do a physical job, it's very hard.
Yeah, and actually we've found that the sports sector is a really unique place in terms of mental health in the workplace, because we work unsociable hours, we're under pressure constantly, and that's not just from the people around us, it's from ourselves as well, because we're always pushing ourselves forward. I think Adam was sort of alluding to that, and Paige as well. So yeah, it's easy to say, but we do need to be kinder on ourselves in the sports sector, because we've got factors that no other sector tends to have to face and battle. So yeah, very unique, and especially within horse racing as well. It's great. We know that actually being out in nature really supports our mental health. Being around animals really supports our mental health. But when we're put on that stage day in, day out, trying to win races, it's really, really tough. And then you go through transitions in life like retirement or injuries, and that adds to it, because it takes away what you feel your purpose is, what you've been working towards most of your life. So very, very challenging industry.
Yeah, and we've just had an anonymous question from someone anonymous. So thanks for the question. And it was basically, do we think there could be a better work-life balance for racing in general? I mean, if there could be a better work-life balance for everything, I'm sure. And racing's probably more so. And I think the one thing my answer, I think a lot of people that if you're outside of racing, or I think people think, oh, they work too much. The amount of stable lasses I know, and I was the same when I did it, I didn't want to not go to work. If my horse was running on my Sunday off, I would want to go. So some of that was my own doing. They'd say, oh, it's your weekend off, someone else can take it. And I wouldn't have it. I'd be like, no, I want to take it. It's my horse. If it wins, I want to be there. So, I mean, yes, of course there could be with anything, but that goes back to a much wider issue. I mean, I don't know, you'd probably have the most view on this, probably maybe you, Amy, if yards need to have the staff to have a better work-life balance, and some people want to work on their weekend off, some people want to work overtime for extra money and those things, but I'm assuming, could there be a better work-life balance? The answer is probably yes.
There probably is. Yes, you're probably right. And I think, Leona, it comes down to that. It's all about boundaries as well. Quite a lot of the staff might live on yard and feel obliged as well to go racing. And it's about having that, like you say, the work-life balance and sometimes prioritizing, right, I need my week, and knowing yourself mentally as well, right, where am I at the end? Have I had enough rest? Am I eating well? Am I drinking well? Am I moving? Am I doing all those things?
Yeah.
It's really important to have that balance, and also do that yourself as well. I think that's a bigger question in terms of industry balance. I mean, we've seen the pressures everybody's under, there's not enough staff, but I think it's about doing what we can internally for ourselves as well.
Yeah, I don't know if I even dare ask you, Paige. I mean, I'm sure you never felt like you worked a day in your life, did you? Did you ever feel like you worked too much?
Well, no. Well,
maybe looking back now that you're tired.
No, it's so hard, isn't it? Like, as I say, I fell into my riding literally just because all I wanted to do was ride horses, and then every time I get a ride, there was that buzz of, oh my goodness, I can't believe it, like this was never supposed to happen, and that's kind of how it sort of snowballed into my riding career. But I think that was a really interesting point that Amy made about the sort of knowing your sort of own status as such. And I think sport's great, like kind of thinking back to where the conversation started, like sport's great at sort of providing these highs and these lows, and we can thrive off these sort of positive emotions that come with sport, but naturally on that roller coaster you've always got to come back down as well. And one thing that I'm really learning now, which I wasn't very good at when I was riding, was that sort of checking in and looking at where I am emotionally. And because especially when you're busy, you kind of end up just carrying on rolling on. And it's like, well, especially with riding, I was in the lucky position where if I had a bad month not riding, when there's chances are a winner will come around the corner, and then that will provide that sort of temporary high. But I never probably actually checked in with myself and reflected on how I was actually doing. And I think actually that's one thing I've learned now that I wish I'd done better when I was riding, was having
what about when you were injured? When you were injured and you had got that time, did that, was that when you would reflect, or didn't you? But you wish you had?
I was never good enough at it, because I set myself targets. And again, I suppose Adam can probably relate to this. When you're doing your rehab, there's an end goal. So it's like, right, check the list. And I think that's where I really struggled with my last injury. Obviously, through head injuries, you can't just have an end goal. And then that's when I kind of really started feeling the effects of not checking in on myself. Because when you've got a broken bone and your surgeon goes, right, you've got 3 months on crutches. You're like, well, that's fine. I've got 3 months on crutches. I'll be back. And actually, it was probably the last 2 weeks before I came back that I'd feel at my lowest, because I'd be worrying and anxious about getting back. But then once I'm back, again, sport just has this amazing effect on you where you're like, yes, I'm back on my purpose. Like Adam was saying, I've got my purpose back. But actually, it was all temporary. And now I sort of have realized how much deeper you can actually, like how much more controllable these emotions are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Sam, obviously, we just actually had a question for you, so I'll read that out. It's Sam, what impact have you seen from the recent stable visits for mine beneficiaries? So what are you getting? What are you seeing? Is it helping? We need to do more of it.
To be fair, the feedback we've got has been overwhelmingly positive. So just for anyone who doesn't know, we've been working with like BHA on actually organising yard visits for our local mine service users. So these are people with mental health problems who are accessing local mental health support. And we then organise yard visits for them, funded by the BHA, so that they can go and tour the facilities, find out a bit more about horses and horse racing, and get to interact with horses themselves. So I suppose a bit different, because it's not that professional elite level, it's more on the ground, grassroots. But yeah, some of the impact from that we've seen is everyone who's been on those yard visits and completed a survey has said they've reported an uplift in their mood levels.
Really?
For 3/4 of those people, their mood before was actually quite low, and afterwards it was high. So we are seeing amazing impact from that. And then I'd just love to share some quotes with participants who went on those yard visits. So one of them said the yard visits have been a godsend for them, much better than medication, which now they're off because they're doing more physical activity, and the yard visits have really helped. So they're forever grateful for everyone involved. And then someone who has borderline personality disorder said that they felt like the yard visit really helps them and made them feel happy, especially as they're going through a really challenging time, and it just made them escape from life. So I think that's really powerful, those quotes and the impacts the yard visits have had.
Yeah, absolutely, of course. Just before we go on to the next thing, I just wanted to ask Adam. So obviously you were saying that you're an Olympic swimmer. I don't know that much about you. I'm sure you don't me. When you stopped swimming, what my transition, obviously Paige is probably currently going through hers. When I stopped riding, I always knew I was going to go onto the TV, because I kind of had it already, so it was actually very easy for me. I didn't have that middle struggle, Did you, when you first stopped swimming professionally, did you know you were going to maybe not end up here, but did you know what you were going to do? How hard was it, the transition?
Yeah, I made all the mistakes, Leona. I didn't make any plans. I think my last 2 years, I sort of self-funded my career. So when I came to an end, I'd lost the support of like the lottery funding that we used to receive. I lost the support of my performance lifestyle advisor from the English Institute of Sport. So I really struggled, and I've got a diagnosis in depression. I've had that throughout my swimming career, but particularly at the end of my career. And we talk about transitions and being able to deal with transitions. And there's a model out there, a Lavelli model, that sort of says we can deal with 2 or 3 transitions at one time. But if we put on another one, that's when it finds it really difficult. And it just coincided that at the end of my swimming career, I had lots of career. We had a career change. I also had a relationship that came to an end, and I found that period really difficult. If I'm really honest, it probably took me 5 or 6 years to get through that. And I think finding purpose is really important, something that you're passionate about. But I think sometimes we get stuck in the wheel of, we've got to find this athlete, we've got to find this jockey a new job, a new career, and therefore they have an easy transition. And for me, the career is such a small part of a successful transition. Are we dealing with that whole identity piece, that you are no longer a jockey, you are no longer a sports person, you are no longer the role that you are in? you know, we've got to deal with all of those things in order for people to become really successful in a new career. I think the most successful athletes now are doing that dual career, so they're developing skills and other interests alongside their sports career. We know from research that will keep them in their sporting careers a little bit longer, and help them perform, because it gives them this separation away from their sport. And going back to that question about life balance, I think, you know, we all live incredibly busy lives and we all struggle with that. But one of the things that we can do is find very, very small moments in a day to have a break mentally and do something for us, our well-being. It's almost like microdosing, you know, can I do some small pieces today that are going to have this sort of bigger effect? So I'd be encouraging your staff, your jockeys, to be building in small amounts of well-being every single day, even if it's for 2 or 3 minutes, you know, 3 or 4 times a day. They might get this balance where it's 50-50, but they'll definitely feel the benefit of that.
Yeah, I think funny that you say about, you know, that kind of having a job alongside. Paige will know, and so do I, massively about Jets. I think it's probably one of the best things they've ever done. You know, an educational training scheme, so that riders, especially if things aren't going well and they're thinking this isn't going to last forever, to then be able to start training to do, you know, so you're seeing the life after the life, the life after what you thought was always going to be your life, because you do. I think when you're in racing, you never see anything beyond that. So I think Jets is really massively helped that. But someone has just written in a question that was very good. So one of them, which from Chloe, thank you, was how can we better communicate the positive physical and mental health impact of sport, particularly horse racing, to the wider community? So that's interesting, isn't it? Because we of course talk about the negative and the bad things that it can do to you and the things that it draws, you know, drags you down perhaps. But, you know, you said, Paige, you know, it's been your entire life in a positive way, you know, and the impact in a positive way that horses have on people's lives as well, of course. That's what their therapy horses, for example.
Yeah, I think, it's it's an interesting one, because I suppose it's really hard when you're on that sort of hamster wheel to sit back and remember to tell people everything that's good, because I think naturally humans, we pick up on the bad stuff, don't we? But I think that is really important to try and send that message out to the community. And I suppose if you have the luxury of time to be able to engage with people like sort of racing together and racing to school and stuff, and help sort of, I don't know, just exploring that yourself and seeing locally, like how you can sort of bring in local people to show them racing, and actually how 95% of the time the yard's a really happy place to work, but any workplace is always going to have that 5% which you can't get stuck on. And there's definitely things that, you know, with social media and stuff, you know, loads of people love to kind of get that escapism through social media. And so just for people within racing to share those lovely moments on the gallops, you know, like Sam was saying about the yard visits, you know, people don't easily have access to these places. And so for us within the community, being able to share those things, hopefully will give other people happiness as well.
Yeah, I assume, Sam, you're trying to, you know, very much, the problem is, you see, with the for everybody, a mental health charity, a lot of people, of course, don't want to put themselves out there that they've been treated or they've seen you, or because of course they then have to put their problems out there publicly, which if they don't want to, completely understandable. But from the point of view of, are you publicising and or trying to, of course, wanting to push those yard visits so that people know they're happening? And when you're going in there, are you getting the positive side of things? And are people, you know, do you get to hear the positive side and the reason why people have chosen the jobs that they have in these sports?
Yeah, there's still stigma around mental health. Like, we've progressed massively in the last decade or so, but it still exists. But I think the important thing with stuff like the yard visits is not to make it mental health focused, actually. It's a yard visit. It's good for your well-being. It doesn't need to be marketed as this is for you because you have a mental health problem. It's more about trying to improve your well-being. I think that's the same for people working in the industry as well. If you hear something where someone's going, this service for anyone who needs mental health support, you get a bit scared. But then if you say this service is just to support you at this moment, you're a bit more like, okay, that makes sense. I'm more willing, because it doesn't have that specific mental health element.
Yeah, it's not mental health based. It's just a case of how are you. And from your Amy, so racing welfare, I assume you have obviously all of your things in place if someone comes in and they do want that kind of mental health support via racing welfare.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have the counselling service, which is available to people 24/7. They can reach our support line and have that in the moment support. And that has been something that, like you said, Sam, it's that, well, actually it's for my well-being. It's not necessarily that I've got a mental health issue or problem. It's actually I'm treating my physical health as well as I am my mental health, and that holistic piece for putting that person in the middle, really.
Yeah, NARS is obviously a pretty new thing, isn't it? I mean, I don't know how long that's been going now, but that seems like a kind of great thing from a stable staff point of view, that they're really kind of going into yards and seeing how things are being done, and people are able to go to them with problems in and around yards, jobs, the industry, full stop with things.
I think everybody needs to have a voice within this industry, and it's really important that actually those guys working there on the front line have got people like ourselves and NARS supporting them for whatever they might need, if that's an advocacy piece or just support and help with mental and physical health as well.
Yeah, we got another question, which is again from Anonymous. Thank you though to Adam and Sam. Can you provide, please, examples of how other sports are improving mental and physical health of people connected with their sports, whether that be fans, participants, football, rugby, perhaps working with both of your charities? So examples of how other sports are improving mental and physical health. Either, both.
Yeah, I don't mind going. So I think what we need to remember is that we know physical activity and movement is brilliant for our well-being, and therefore impacts positively on our mental health. So I guess what we sometimes get sucked into is elite level sport, and talking about some of the issues and challenges that elite level sportsmen people have linked to their sport. So although I swam for a very long time and did a hell of a lot of training, I don't think physically, I don't think it was particularly good for me, and mentally, I don't think it was particularly good for me. But in terms of swimming and exercising now, I think it's fantastic. And would I change anything? Absolutely not, because I'm extremely happy and proud about that career. So I think elite level sport can play a huge impact in promoting active lifestyles. We can see role models. Certainly, I know last week we brought one of our young people from a supported living housing association to one of the yards, and an amazing experience. Such a positive thing to do, and to consider racing as other things other than sitting on a horse and going really fast. Because from the outside, that's probably what we see. But actually, we've done also visits to some of the big stadiums, and there's hospitality there, there's front of house, there's security, there's so many roles that people can get into. So I think sport can do a real positive experience to inspire people to support sport or be more active. And I think also sports people have to, and what Sam has said, the last 10 years, some of that stigma has definitely decreased. We're all talking about it more, particularly after COVID. It seemed that COVID was the key for everyone opening up to how they feel. Fantastic. Yeah. So I think the more we can see sports people do that will encourage other people to talk about what's going on and what they're experiencing.
When you say that you didn't feel mentally and physically when you were swimming before it was good for you, but now it is, do you think that's because the pressure's off?
I think it's because I had this attached self-esteem to what I did, and for me, and I'm sure it's the same in racing. I could lose or finish third or second in a race by 100th of a second, and that could be the end of it. That could be me not going to the Olympic Games, or swim 0.2 of a second faster and make the team, and everything's great. So I think for me, the extreme highs and lows for me weren't particularly healthy. And I think they definitely they built a resilience in me, which which is something I use today. But I do know that, and we do know because it's proven that exercise and being physically active and being outside, interacting with animals, all of that stuff is fantastic for our well-being. But I think, like anything, if you do anything too much, it can have a negative effect.
Yeah, so then the same question, please, Sam, to you about examples of how other sports are improving mental and physical health, and you'd know plenty, I'm sure, being from mine.
Yeah, there's lots out there. And I would just like to say as well, horse racing is doing great things. The industry has come together, unlike a lot of other sports, and want to take a collaborative viewpoint around this and do work together. But I suppose I just want to share...
We've not paid Sam to say that, because we all love racing. We really haven't.
Definitely not. But I suppose I just wanted to share an example from football. So we had a partnership, 4-year partnership with the English Football League, EFL, and you may have noticed like the mind squiggles on the back of shirts for 4 seasons, which was great. That was to raise awareness of mind and mental health, and that did work. We actually saw a lot more people, a lot more men actually come and access mind support. But also alongside that, we wanted to ensure that the football staff were trained around mental health. And we're not saying being mental health experts, because none of us can be. It's actually around just having that general awareness and ensuring that you're just looking out for your colleagues, your participants, the people you work with, volunteers, anyone. And actually that really helps. So that training increased confidence and knowledge around mental health.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those, isn't it? If you're spending time, Paige would know, if you're spending time in a racing yard all the time around people, you get to know their personality and what they're like. And when they're then not like that, to kind of be vigilant and ask if they're okay and why they're not like that. But yeah, I've actually got some specific questions for each of you, if that's okay. So we'll start with Paige. First one, as a professional Jockeys Association board member and obviously a very successful former jump jockey, what insight, just briefly, would you give us to the impact of the injuries and the retirement, but also, you know, the positive impacts, do you think, riding professionally? What do you think that's given you? You can start with that if you want to. What, you know, what has it given you going forward in life, do you feel, racing and riding and probably having the injuries? You said about resilience, but you didn't know if you were.
Yeah, I think, you know, we have touched on a few of those already, so I'll try not to bore people. But I think the main thing that the sort of sport of racing's given me in particular, the most positive thing, I think, is actually the community. I think what's amazing about racing is just, and probably all sports, is you can turn up and, you know, you can just go and do it. And you don't necessarily have to go and talk to people, or, you know, you can engage with people if you want to, but at the same time, if you want to go and ride out the back of the string and just have some quiet time to yourself, you can just do that, enjoy it, and then go home. And it's just nice to have that reason to sort of get up, be part of the community, and just have something going on in your life that actually can be slightly separate to all the actual kind of horrible normal life stuff. And, you know, I think most, like, that is probably what I take from my riding, particularly as we've spoken about all the sort of, you know, negatives of the mental health struggles that athletes have. But you know, and that obviously is very sort of niche. But in general, I think that sort of racing community and just the general, we all love racing, so we're all there for the same purpose. And I think that is quite a big thing for people.
Absolutely. So programs, then the other question, we've obviously got programs like Racing to School, and we've now got those autism friendly race days, haven't we, that are great, and we have the sensory rooms and things like that. Again, they are all to, you know, to have a positive impact. What are your views? Silly question, because I know you're going to say surely that they're amazing. You know, what are your views on those, you know, the Racing to School and those autism friendly days?
I helped Racing to School out with a community-led day at the Ledger meeting last month, and I think what's just, again, it's all about this whole community thing. I think this whole sport, people going, they go to these event days, they open up. I'm always really surprised. I remember at school, if you were asked a question in school, you know, no one wanted to put their hands up, no one really wanted to engage. But actually these days they're great, because you've got kids actually really asking questions, like it's interesting to them and it's pulling them together and no one's getting judged. And I think that for me is probably the best thing about all those days that I've helped with.
Yeah, and when you're there, you feel a proper purpose, because they are actually genuinely engaged and interested and want to ask about you and about what they're seeing.
Yeah, and I think it just shows the sort of the powerfulness of the sport to bring people together. Like, again, I think it goes back to that idea of just people feeling comfortable when they understand why they're somewhere as well.
Yeah, Absolutely. Amy, then a couple of questions for you. Your experience from racing welfare and personally, positive, negative impact on what we're talking about, you know, within racing, and again the support systems that we've got that in racing help. I mean, you'd have loads of experience with all the systems we've got in place, right?
We do, and we're doing some really amazing things. I think we have to look at what we are doing, and we are getting some things really right and really well done almost. I think we have mental health first aid instructors across racing welfare. We deliver mental health first aid across the country. We've got a course going on currently at Lingfield today, which ARC have provided people, and part of the remit is try and get, you know, mental health first aiders in all those big yard studs, and just really, like Adam said, you know, having somebody that people can talk to and break the stigma. It's a lovely industry when the sun is shining and you've ridden your lots, but when it's a day possibly like today is out there, it's not quite so fantastic. And yeah, it's just about doing those good things.
Yeah, and then the other one was obviously Racing Welfare worked with Sporting Memories to bring emotional and mental well-being through reminiscence to the beneficiaries. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the impact that had?
Yeah, so that's a wonderful initiative that we rolled out across the country, and it just gathers. We have a large group of retired beneficiaries that we get together sort of once a month for a coffee morning, and then the reminiscence group, and they could be people that are really struggling with dementia, social isolation, and to get them together, and they can't tell you what they did yesterday, but they can tell you that horse that they looked after in 1970 that was fourth in the Derby, what it was, how it ran, what it used to behave like, and how much of a bad eater it was. And that's just the joy of those. And it's
amazing.
Great wall, if anyone was wondering.
Yeah, amazing. Sam, then we'll move on to you. We've got a couple of questions for you as well. So the first one you've already answered, I think, because it's during National Racehorse Week. You mind groups obviously went to the trainers' yard, I think it was 4, wasn't there? And to try and test out, develop the concept, etc. It's how is the feedback? What's it been like? But we already know.
Yeah, I was going to say, obviously very, very positive. And I was going to say, it relates to Jen's questions in the Q&A about what is the role of racing to help local communities regarding mental health. And it is those yard visits. Yeah. I think Adam alluded to that. You took one of your participants to a yard visit. I bet that person never considered going to a yard visit. And I'm assuming there's a lot of young people, especially out there, who would never consider going to a yard, would never consider getting near a horse, but actually you can open your doors and encourage people to come down and they'll benefit on the day, but you never know, you might get the next jockey out of them as well.
Yeah, I'm sure I say you'd have a view on that as well, Adam, but we'll come back to that. The other question for you, Sam, was how does your role within Mine work to support those with physical and mental health challenges? I assume massively that the two end up being linked, don't they?
Yeah, completely. Our physical and mental health are entwined, and we know that being physically active boosts our mood and reduces our risk of some mental health problems, particularly depression. So my role at Mind is actually supporting the sports sector to be a more inclusive and welcoming place for everyone, but in particular people with mental health problems. And that's not just your participants, your players, it's actually for the staff. We really want to ensure that the workforce is supported. So we deliver training, we do all range of support. But if anyone is out there looking for support around mental health, please do contact us, because we can have a conversation with you and provide, I suppose, quite bespoke support for what your needs are.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason why I said I'd come back to it is because the first question for Adam is about that National Racehorse Week. And we talked a little bit about that yard visit, but just tell us about that in a little bit more detail and how you feel that kind of the crossover has happened.
Yeah, I think one of our athlete mentors, Liz Johnson, took a young person that she's working with who's in sanctuary supported living, very complex backgrounds, lots of additional needs. And for us as a charity, you know, we really believe that every young person deserves a chance. And they one of the things that we know is beneficial is broadening their experiences. And In this case, we're talking about a yard visit, but it could be going into an office environment. It could be working with other people with similar needs or very difficult different needs. So I think, you know, those broad experiences are really beneficial. Something that, you know, this young person in particular last week would have never had the opportunity to do. And just a brilliant, you know, I think it's something we need to do more. We'd like to do more.
Yeah.
You know, we've got programs running up and down the country. We work with 11 to 25-year-olds who are facing really disadvantaged situations in their lives. You know, let's get them into racing and into those places, because I think it just broadens their experience and it's such a positive. I mean, Sam's already talked about some of the benefits and the feedback they've got from those participants that Mind have took. So yeah, let's do more.
I think the one thing you're talking about, those groups as well, are, you know, kind of younger people, etc., and for them, you know, for not just the lesser privileged background, but, you know, that's where I was from. But the one thing I think we do very well, and Paige will know in detail like I do, the Skeltons, for example, you know, their yard has become literally a family. They have a cook on site, they have it, and not every yard can provide that, of course. But if you're 16, 17 and you've got a job and you've just moved out of home and, you know, or like you say, you've not had that nice upbringing, you can suddenly be kind of thrust into a place where you can live, work, you then working alongside your friends, you know, and you're being kind of taken care of. And that yard do it very, very well. They have the finances to do it. I get that. But I think that's probably not highlighted enough either. You know, that we actually in racing and giving people homes a lot of the time. Obviously, Racing Welfare, I know, do it through that. But I mean, plenty of jobs, they come with that living. I mean, there's not many other sports you get that with.
No, definitely not. I mean, the thing that you've just described is amazing. I think, you know, for those people that have a real interest, it's great that there is a pathway into racing. And but I think for some of our young people, it's about sort of broadening their experiences and having those days where they can experience something brand new, get them out of the place where they are 24/7, and often believe that's the place that they're going to live, you know, born, live and die in. So let's get them moving.
Yeah, we need to let them see that they have the option and it's there if they want it. There was another question as well for you, Adam, so I would just read you that. Someone sent in a question. How does elite level sport trickle down into community programs?
How does what, sorry?
How does elite level sport trickle down into community programs, do you feel?
Well, obviously, you know, through the funding of Sport England funds grassroots sports across the country, and obviously they will feed into elite level sports. So I think it goes from bottom up and up downwards. But I think, you know, for us specifically as a charity, you know, we are using ex-elite sports people, and we'd love to get some jockeys involved, you know, with all that experience. Yeah, hopefully when we're speaking to Paige afterwards, see if we can get her involved in some of the work we do. But actually, you know, athletes, sports people have had some really unique experiences, and it's taught them and it's given them a set of skills. We've already talked about resilience, but and we train those athletes to work with young people, and often the young people that we're working with haven't engaged with counsellors, they haven't engaged with school teachers, they haven't engaged in people of authority, but actually something about sports they buy into. And we're not hoping to turn them into the next world champion or Olympic champion. We are trying to move them forward to whatever it is they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything anybody wants to add individually?
I've got a question, Leona. Have you got any tips for this weekend?
Have I? Not yet, but I'm sure I will have at some point. I put King of Steel up this morning, so even if Ascot's on, the rain's ruined everything, so who knows. You'd probably be better off asking Paige. She's probably better than me. Anything else?
I would just like to say, if anyone does need any help or support, obviously our support line is there for anybody should they need it.
Sam? Same?
Yeah. I was going to say similar, like you're here trying to look at how to support other people's mental health and well-being.
Yes.
You need to focus on your own self-care. Self-care isn't selfish. Please do look after yourselves, because if you can't help yourself, it's very difficult to help others.
Yeah, absolutely. And Paige, I know you're very involved in everything. I know you've been doing those Racing to School days and stuff like that, and will continue to do so. And we've already had a spoiler that you're speaking to Adam after.
Well, I don't think she doesn't know anything about that
She
yet.
doesn't know
I
yet.
was
She
gonna-
doesn't know.
I was gonna-
No, great to have you all on here. I'm just going to get up. I want a picture because we've got that next episode. So there we go. She's beat me to it. Well done. Well done, that lady. So yeah, the next episode is going to be, as you can see, Thursday, the 16th of November at 11 a.m. A shared challenge, innovations in education and employment. Obviously, you can see there, sign up at racingtogether.co.uk/newsletter to stay up to date. So do check that out. Housekeeping for the end. Obviously, yeah, join the newsletter, follow Racing Together on social to find out about future episodes. I'm sure you can follow all the wonderful people who've been on here as well. If you want to speak to them or have any help privately, they will absolutely do that, or they'll point you in the right direction, I'm sure. And of course, if I can, I will as well. Yeah, and then there's going to be that survey as well. So if you could let us know your feedback. Pretty sure we haven't got any more questions, or have we? Yeah, just how can work in the community help with mental health? Well, we've kind of touched on that quite a lot already, haven't we, about the horses and, you know, the care they give and sports, full stop. But I think we're doing well. I think racing's done a lot more than it used to do 10 years ago, and I think it'll do a lot more again in another 10 years. Hopefully you all agree. And as I say, there'll be that kind of survey at the end. And if there was anything to anyone, I'm sure all four of the guys on the panel and me, if you've got any personal questions and or anything you want to ask or add, I'm sure you'll be able to find us all on social media or wherever, or do contact us through this. And we'd be happy to help and answer any questions, I'm sure. Yeah, thanks for watching. And thanks for being on the panel, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.